Hello, my name is Natalie Cunningham, and I'm going to present to you what I did on my service learning project, as well as the program outcomes, how I achieved those, and what I learned while looking back on my project. So I completed my project with Reach Agency. Reach Agency is in Neenah, Wisconsin, and commits to understanding, responding, and treating all forms of abuse, such as physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Reach Counseling has many advocates, does many events, activities, and programs to reach out to individuals as well as the whole community. Reach focuses on inclusion and ensuring that everyone feels comfortable and gets the help that they need. They hold many support groups as part of this. These are the program outcomes that I met while doing my service learning project. The first one is to identify social problems and their causes. The second is to use effective communication techniques. The third is to apply ethical standards from the National Association of Social Workers or the National Organization of Human Services and or the NADIC, the Association for Addiction Professionals Code of Ethics. The fourth is to conduct a service learning project, which is what I'm explaining to you about mine. And the fifth is to evaluate the service learning experience as far as like what I learned, what I liked, what I would like to happen the next time I do a service learning project. So my project was to complete surveys for the support groups that Reach has as part of reaching out to the community, as well as individuals that require services. Surveys are necessary for the agency to learn what is going well, what can be improved, and what resources their clients and the community needs. Agencies can also use the feedback and statistics from the surveys to apply for funding, as well as present the community with what individuals need to create a happier and healthier environment. I learned that the way you communicate an idea can bring a different outcome. It is incredibly important to use inclusive language and to be clear and concise. The way a question or other sentence is worded can change the way a person responds, understands, and feels while they're reading it. Our words have power, so we must use them with careful consideration. Using effective communication techniques is one of the course outcomes that I presented in the previous slide, and creating these surveys helped me meet that outcome by learning how to use effective communication techniques. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of the survey. So there are 7 support groups. So I created 7 surveys. There's an anti-trafficking support group, women of color, teen support group, the Native American Women's Talking Circle support group, the LGBTQ plus support group, the Latina Women support group, and a Woman Survivor support group. So when I completed these surveys, I went to attended staff meetings, kind of learned what they would like to be put in these surveys. I did a lot of research to learn like what kind of language to use, I kind of looked around to see what other agencies use for their surveys. I also met with the individual facilitators of the support group to see what questions that they would like for their particular support group survey. These surveys are not complete as once the support groups continue to meet, because some of them were on hold for a little bit due to COVID. So once they continue to meet, then the facilitators will get an even better idea of what kind of questions to ask. But this is what they will use for starters. So like the anti-trafficking women support group. I started by, well, first I tried to make each one look presentable, look kind of fun and colorful. The first question is, who is your support group facilitator? These first couple questions are asked on all of them, as well as the demographic questions, because these are needed, especially demographics are needed when applying for a grant. So who is your support group facilitator? How did you learn about this group? This way Reach knows how they're reaching out to people and also gaining ideas of how else they can reach out to people. Then the demographics. The demographics is huge on how, is very important on how to word the demographics, such as for gender. If you want to say prefer not to say, some people don't know what theirs is yet, or they're not comfortable. And you also want to include an other in case they would like to share what they identify as. Race and ethnicity, we decided to have them type it in to make sure that we included every single one, especially because some people may consider theirs to be like 2 different ethnicities versus just one. So we wanted to make sure that they got an opportunity to tell us exactly what they identify as and didn't feel like they were put into a box and had to choose. Then they're counting the cities. We see like what areas that they're reaching. These were, and then the general support group questions, these were on all of them as well. So how long have you attended this group? We split it up into these couple categories, as you can see. So then, so we can kind of see like, oh, what are people experiencing when they first attend the group? Or like, how are people feeling about it after they attended for a longer period of time? And then of course, positive. So what is their favorite part of the group? And then we're always looking for improvement. It's part of our field. So what do you think could be changed or added to improve the group? Healthy coping mechanisms are a huge part of what the support groups revolve around. So these were a couple examples that we felt were a pretty good umbrella of the different coping mechanisms that are taught in the support groups. So how to handle my emotions, how to talk about my feelings and emotions, different relaxation techniques, self-care, how to disclose to friends and family, increasing healthy coping mechanisms when they're triggered, and then of course a space for others so they can tell us anything else that they have learned. And then now at the bottom, the last section in each survey is specific to that support group. So this one, do you feel respected, safe, and comfortable in this support group? Do the dates and times of the support group work best for you? That way, then maybe there's a different day that works better for everyone and it would make their life a little bit easier. So that way we can gain better feedback on when to even hold the support group. Do you feel safe in your community, especially for people who have been trafficked? Safety is a huge aspect to consider because they haven't been safe in the past. Do you feel safe in the support group? So by the facilitator, the other support group members, just to ensure that the support group is a safe place for them, that they can be themselves. And then do you feel like there are enough resources in the community to meet your needs? So that is one example of the support groups. The other one, I would like to show some of the support groups, such as the Women of Color support group and the Latina Women support group. They have similar specific support group questions, as well as the LGBTQ plus support group. As you see, I have a different kind of setup as far as like the colors, the theme, the way it looks. So often LGBTQ plus people don't feel safe in their community. There's a lot of discrimination. There's a lot of judgment towards them. So one of the questions is, do you feel safe being yourself in your community? Because not only does Reach want to know that, but then they can go to different agencies in the community and be like, look, they're not feeling safe. What can we do to make them feel safe? Do you feel safe being yourself in this support group? Do you feel that your support group facilitator respects your pronouns and identity? That's huge. We all need to make sure that we're asking someone what their pronouns are, being respectful of their pronouns, and working hard towards using those correct pronouns in which they identify as. Do you feel that your identity is validated in this support group? Do you feel respected, safe, and comfortable in this support group? Do you feel that there are community resources available for you? This is another question that Reach can take this and either create resources or go to other agencies surrounding and be like, this is what people are looking for. This is what they feel like they're lacking. This is what they would like. And then once again, does the day and time of the meeting work best for you? So those are two examples of the support groups. I will also show you the Latina Woman Support Group. This support group is presented and discussed in Spanish. And these questions were also largely based on culture. So do you feel culturally safe in your community to be yourself? Do you feel culturally safe in your support group to be yourself? Do you feel culturally supported in your community? Once again, then can reach out to the community and be like, hey, this is what we're lacking. This is what we're doing good. But like, what if we did this? And they might be able to get other agencies on board to be able to culturally support the different members. Do you feel that there are enough resources in the community to meet your needs? Do you feel culturally supported by your support group? Do you enjoy the support group, that the support group is in Spanish? This way, if more people would prefer it to be in English, and they could maybe reroute or reframe how the support group is presented and discussed. Do you feel that you're culturally identified with your group facilitator? When it's important for minorities to feel like they identify with their facilitator. Well, it's important for anyone to feel like they identify with their facilitator, but especially in different cultures or groups of people, when they're usually kind of looked out as very different from everyone else and they're not treated the same. Then they might feel like they can share more with the facilitator, or that the facilitator better understands them. Do you feel that your support group facilitator respects and values you? Do you feel that the conversations and information given in the support group are culturally appropriate? And do you feel respected, safe, and comfortable in this support group? Those are just a few examples of the support groups that I created, or the support group surveys that I created. Once again, those are going to be always going to be added to as the facilitators or the supervisors at REACH realize that they may need different information, new information, things like that. In addition to the surveys as part of my project, I created the spreadsheet to input all the information to be used for the VOCA grants. VOCA stands for Victims of Crime Act. So that way, there's 4 of them that they fill out. So I have the spreadsheet set up so it's easy to take all the information in a quarter, that each advocate can access their own survey, and then everything totals up at the end. Grants help with funding, and the more funding you get, the more ability you have to fit needs that the individuals and the community needs. So not only did I do the surveys, but I created the grant information spreadsheet that the information from the surveys goes into. So I had 4 goals when I started looking at the project and what I needed to accomplish. My goals were to attend 3 staff meetings by April 30th, 2021 that are 1 hour long each. I definitely did this. I definitely attended more than that as well. I really enjoyed going to the staff meetings. Not only did I get to see kind of how an agency is run, but I was able to ask questions and get different perspectives and different opinions on the work I was doing, as well as just the work that REACH Counseling does as a whole. To attend 15 different events by May 1st, 2021 to learn about sexual violence, culture, and how to better help a survivor. Many of the individuals that attend the support groups are survivors of some sort of sexual violence, especially the anti-trafficking one. And sexual violence has a huge impact on the individual's life, as well as how they interact with other people, how they feel, the trauma that they have, how like the community, it affects the community as a whole. And And then help 3 Reach employees create an exit survey by April 16th, 2021. So before I started creating the group surveys, I met with 3 other Reach employees to create an exit survey that all individuals that use the resources at Reach complete when they leave or about like midway through their services. So this way I was better able to, one, learn what kind of language to use, two, learn what should go on a survey and what should not, kind of what questions they're looking for, and just learn a lot more about surveys and why they're needed as well. So I helped with that. And then the final goal, of course, was to create 7 support group surveys by May 12th, 2021, which I have completed them before that date. So, I attended a lot of different events, activities, or participated in many different activities. I went to a lot of meetings. These provided me with education and experience, not only in the community, but with what the agency does and how to work with different individuals, especially when it comes to survivors of sexual assault. April was actually Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So there were a lot of activities that I learned throughout that. Such as how sexual violence affects people, society's tendency to victim blame, and how survivors of sexual assault heal, the different steps they take, different routes that they can take, such as that. During the meetings and activities, there are many topics that were discussed. Here are kind of a more in-depth list of the activities that I attended. Like I said, the staff meetings, planning meetings for different Sexual Assault Awareness Month or SAM month activities, hands-on activities. So I went to hands-on Oshkosh, which is a big community event. I worked in the Women's Center. I also went to Denim Day and Boys and Girls Club in Oshkosh and got to share about what Denim Day is, and what victim blaming is and how victim blaming can be harmful, as well as how we can work against victim blaming and rape culture. Creating the spreadsheets, creating the surveys, both the exit and the group surveys. I went to advocate discussion panels where advocates were asked questions. They explained about their job as well as their perspective on different issues and how it affects their clients. I found a lot of statistics, infographics, and images as I am putting together folders of these different statistics, infographics, and images that can be posted on Reach's website page so that more people can learn about these things, as well as reach out for resources if needed, such as the support groups. There were stories from survivors of sexual violence that I attended. These I found to be particularly heartbreaking. But I also learned a lot. I learned different methods, coping mechanisms that people use after experiencing such violence, as well as how sexual violence can really make people feel like they're not human or feel like they're less of themselves. I also learned about how like someone's culture or their sexual orientation and identity can also affect how they may feel after sexual violence occurs. I attended different webinars on topics revolving sexual violence, webinars on trauma-related topics, and webinars are inclusion. Inclusion would such as like including like the LGBTQ plus community, those who have disabilities, those of different cultures. There's a lot of social racial injustices that are happening right now. So I learned more about those as well and how that affects inclusion and how someone can get trauma from that. So like The different related issues, I guess the top three, if I had to put everything into a category that I learned, would be about sexual violence, trauma, diversity, and inclusion. During the meetings and different events, there were many topics that were discussed besides these. The meetings focused on collaboration among the staff and volunteers at REACH. Some of the topics included making sure that the right procedures were taking place, that everyone was practicing self-care, and that people were reaching out if they needed anything. Actually, something that I found to be really awesome about REACH is that the staff is given Juneteenth off to focus on self-care and be able to celebrate Juneteenth, such as giving support to Black-owned businesses. Following procedures, asking for supervision, and practicing self-care are all included in the National Organization of Human Services ethical standards. I also withheld the ethical standards by being respectful in all settings, asking for help when needed, and looking out for the greater good of the community. Adhering to the ethical standards is a competency in the service learning course focuses on as well, so I achieved that. So here's just some different statistics that I found during my research on sexual violence. Every 92 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. 92 seconds in America. There's a lot of seconds in a day. So think about that and think about how many people in just one day are victims of sexual violence. 15 out of 16 rapists will walk free. So that means only about 1 in every 16 gets in trouble, basically, for what they do, goes to jail or prison. 1 in 6 women who have been victims of have been victims of an attempted or completed rape. And 85 to 90% of victims of sexual assaults know their assailant. So the fact that they know their assailant, I learned in the different activities that I attended that can really affect them emotionally and mentally and create a lot of issues when it comes to boundaries and trust. Because if they know their assailant, they've trusted this person up to this point, they might even believe this person's a good person, or they're very important in their lives, and they have a lot of confusion after the sexual violence, especially if it is done as a child, because they're often groomed and told not to tell anyone, or that it's just a game. And deep down, they may know that something's wrong, but they don't know exactly what it is. And then they don't get help for it, or because they're a child, they may not know how to even ask for it. And then that affects them throughout their entire lifetime. Some more statistics on sexual violence is 50, this is based on human trafficking, which a lot of people feel like isn't as prevalent as it is. Human trafficking is anytime someone is sold for their services, basically, especially against their will. So 50% of traffic victims are less than 16. 50% are minors under the age of 16. 1 out of 3 of teens who live on the streets will be lured toward prostitution within 48 hours of leaving home. So whether they're leaving home because they have a bad home life or because they really have no option, usually because they have a bad home life, 1 out of 3 within 48 hours. And that's not saying that the other 2/3 aren't lured in at some point, but just within that 48 hours, 1 out of 3. And then a pimp, someone who sells someone, can make 150,000 to 200,000 each year, and the average pimp has 4 to 6 girls, so minors. I also learned a lot about trauma. REACH counseling bases a lot, like they have a lot of trauma-based therapy, and teach their clients how to become resilient and overcome that trauma, as well as how it can affect them. 55, so there's ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, what happened, the traumatic things that happened to you before you turn 18 that are out of your control. 55% of people have at least one. Trauma can actually change the structure of a child's brain, can change the way they handle stress, the way they may react to things, their fight or flight system. Household dysfunction can be part of that trauma, and then it carries on with them through adulthood unless they receive help for it. I also learned a lot about diversity and inclusion. So minorities, those with disabilities, members of the LGBTQ plus community, and how we can include them. So some like just small things that we can all do to include them is ask if we can do anything for them. Our words do have power, so we have to be careful how we word it, but ask like, hey, is there anything I can do for you? Not talk down to them. Make sure that when we draw a picture for a project that we include different races and ethnicities, so they are being represented. Making sure that you use the correct pronouns for the LGBTQ plus community, because these people are under a lot of oppression, and often we don't realize the oppression is even going on because we're not experiencing it ourselves. Those that have disabilities, like another way that they need to be included is make sure that they have access to different buildings to even get in to help get resources. So if you look around next time you go to a building, see if there's a way that they can get into the building. If there's a ramp, if there's the handicap button to open the door, see if there's parking for them, if they can even easily get around the store if things are too close. Also, disabilities are more than just what we see. They can be intellectual disabilities as well. So how can we include them in our daily lives and as professionals? So there are different changes in perspective that I learned throughout my project. Different survivors, they explain how they felt like they weren't a person after the violence. They explain how sexual violence can feel, different ways to heal from the trauma. Some write poetry, some speak about it, some write about it, some advocate for others, some found their healing through art, like I said, through poetry, through gardening, the different ways that they were able to heal, and that they feel that not enough is being done, which is not. And how culture and identity can play a role. There was one seminar that I attended of a Latino homosexual man that explained how he felt like, because, well, one, he was Latino, so family was huge to him. So telling his family would have put pressure on them, he would have been basically a disgrace to the family. So culture can play a huge role in how an individual handles the sexual violence and their identity. So he explained that because he liked men, he felt like he couldn't say anything about it because people would judge him, say that, well, if you like a man, then you should have liked it. So that's victim blaming, which all the stories I listened to, they all basically concluded that victim blaming destroys. So not listening to someone's story, not believing them is absolutely incredibly damaging to the survivor. My agency advocate supervisor explained that she wants the community to realize the resources that are needed, expressed that she appreciated the work that I'd done with the surveys, and expressed that she likes how far things have come in the area, but hopes that they progress more. So yeah, like it's awesome that there's reach, that there's other agencies that are starting to speak out against injustices and sexual violence, but hopes that there are more resources for those different groups of people to help them. And she also talked a lot about how racial injustices affect the community, which they do incredibly, and they make people feel, I guess the way I could explain it would be like feel small, I guess. I also learned different advocate perspectives, especially when I attended the advocate discussion panels, such as like the medical system. There's a lot being done in the medical system as far as like SANE exams. So whenever a survivor comes forward, but there needs to be people who are there to support them, which REACH does. The legal system, as you saw in the statistics in the previous slide, there are a lot of perpetrators that walk free. So there are a couple issues as far as why more are not being persecuted. They talked about why people don't seek help and their perspectives and ideas on why that is, and that we need to focus on support for the survivors and those that have faced oppression and other issues, rather than arguing with them whether they did or not. It's not our job to determine what they felt, it's our job to help them. And a huge one is that better sex education is needed in schools. A lot of schools teach abstinence only, and that just doesn't do it. They need to be taught the different words for body parts. They need to be taught what consent is, what consent is not. So people do not accidentally commit acts of sexual violence, or that they're not being forced into it. And they know how to protect themselves a little better as well. So in our course book by Crass Collier and Retinar in 2005, I learned a lot that aligned right with the course materials. So like what service learning is, which is engaging in community activities, intentional learning and academic goals, and to reflect and connect to the academics that we learned. So I engaged in a lot of community activities. I love doing that. I love the hands-on activities that I got to participate in, as well as the discussions. And you have an intentional learning and academic goal. So my goal, of course, was to learn more about what REACH does, what agencies do, but also about the different issues in our society. And then to reflect and connect to the things that I have learned in my courses. One course that I feel like I really connected to was the human sexuality course, as that talked a lot about sexual violence as well, and I was able to I noticed the connections. Kress et al. 2005 also talked about the small changes that we do make a huge difference in the long run. So like at first I was like, oh, I'm just making surveys, like they're only going to help like the agency just see what the people are doing, but they go a lot farther than that, because then you can use them for funding. You're seeing what could be better for the group, so more people can come to the group, so the members in the group feel more included, feel like they're being listened to. It goes a lot farther than just a survey, basically. Another one is that we need to move from I to we. The community is incredibly needed. I saw in hands-on Oshkosh, there are a lot of people who came together to work. If one or two people had came to help, then we would not have been able to get all the work together. Same with REACH needs the surveys to be able to reach out to other community agencies to get help, because just one person or one agency cannot do everything that is needed. And that we must prepare for unplanned events. We have to expect the unexpected and seek guidance when needed. So like when I had a question, I had to seek guidance. Sometimes I thought that I was like, oh, 100% sure, like I know what I should be doing, I don't have any other questions. And 20 minutes later, I'm asking a question because something came up that I wasn't expecting. So these are a couple things I saw that definitely aligned with the course content that we learned throughout this semester. And now what can we do? So like I said, like it may feel like there's not much that we can do, but there is. We can become more educated, we can research, we can attend seminars, watch documentaries, listen to stories, and we can advocate for better sex education in schools. We can stand up for others. if you're somewhere and you hear someone make a comment that's victim blaming or not inclusive, or someone's not using the correct pronouns, you can stand up, use their correct pronouns, maybe say something to that person later on. A huge thing is we need to believe survivor stories. Like I said before, it's not our job to determine whether it's true or not. It's our job to listen and believe them, because chances are no one else is. So we need to be that person to believe them. We can volunteer, and we can always donate towards awarenesses that we feel passionate about as well. So in my experience working with this agency, I learned a lot about the different tragedies that people go through, as well as the different traumas that they experience and what trauma does. Like I said, it changes the way your brain responds to things. It changes the physical structure of your brain. And not only just how it changes, but what people can do to overcome that trauma or to make it less prevalent in their lives. All these things like human trafficking, sexual violence, it's a lot more prevalent than I thought it was, which is really heartbreaking if you think about it, because I don't think we want to think about it, especially once we find out how prevalent it is. I also learned a lot more about society's role. So there's a lot of victim blaming. There's a lot of thinking things didn't happen, or, oh, well, that's not happening because I've never seen it. But there's a lot that we can do against the issues, but there's a lot that we can do for the issues, as I said in the previous slide. So that society has a huge role, and it's our job to change it, basically, because it's not going to be changed unless if we step forward to change it. That there are more resources that I thought that there were, but there needs to be more because there's still not enough resources for survivors of sexual violence, resources for anything, for shelter, for food, for medical expenses, for therapists. And that there needs to be better education. I learned a lot in the service learning project. And I don't think I would have learned some of the things if I hadn't done this. So that makes me think of, well, how many people aren't doing a service learning project focused on this, and they're never going to learn these things that everyone should know. Also, I learned how much sex education in schools affects the way people view consent, as the way people may feel shame or guilt from it because they're taught abstinence only. So not only did I learn a better education about these things, but I learned about how important the education is. And now I'm able to take all these things I learned, and I can not only teach you all, but also teach people in my future and use it in my profession as well. So all these experiences were very beneficial. So I learned how agencies work. Now I'm able to better, I feel like better prepared when I apply for different agencies in my future. I learned the different aspects of agencies such as counseling, advocacy, how referrals work, resources. These are going to be super beneficial when I enter the field. Documentation and paperwork, incredibly important. It's never going to be anyone's favorite thing, but it's needed. It's needed for grants. It's needed to take to legal systems, knowing what happened when, so you can see progress with your client. So these help as well. Also, I feel like I learned better, like the inclusive language. That's things that I can integrate now. How trauma can make people feel. I want to be a therapist, so learning how trauma can make people feel is going to be highly beneficial for my future, as well as now just when I hear about things, it changes your perspective, really. The importance of self-care, of course, that is a never-ending activity that we need to be doing. I learned better ideas of what I can be doing for self-care, that it really is needed, as there are times where I felt overwhelmed during this project, as well as how to help clients figure out what self-care works best for them. The prevalence of different issues such as discrimination, victim blaming, human trafficking, huge. Now that I know that different prevalences, I'm able to watch for it. I can try to do what I can to go against it, to stand up for people, advocate for them, as well as now that I know how prevalent it is, I have a better understanding of how people may be feeling, and I know better what to say to them now. And I have a better idea of my career goal as far as the population that I want to work with. For a while, I was considering working with survivors of sexual assault. I'm leaning more towards that now and kind of thinking that that's my niche, and that is kind of what I meant to do. Also, for my future, careful about language usage, like person first, being inclusive, educating others, learn more about trauma and trauma-based therapy and how it can help. Now I know to ask how I can help. We need to advocate for others. I learned different ways that I can be a better professional for my future, as I explained in the previous slide, as well as how to prepare for my career, to find a job that is in the field, to continue to do research, continue to learning, it's never ending, and the various necessary resources. On top of these things, these experiences that I learned about, I would like to, this is what I would tell anyone about the community issues, that it's prevalent, about society's different rules. Everything I mentioned here, I think is highly beneficial for the community to learn as well. Here are my references. And that includes my presentation. Thank you for watching. I'm super grateful that I got this experience and that I learned so much. I completed my service learning project, which is one of the course outcomes. I evaluated my experience, and I couldn't be more happy with how this project turned out and with everything that I learned. Thank you.